So thanks again for the invitation and the introduction, Anna. So the idea of today, also speaking with Anna, was to provide an overview of my line of research, which is about music reward, memory, and social sharing, but also trying to link this to my sort of European journey that allowed me to develop all these research questions. So if I had to resume my main research line, I would say that, of course, it's about music and cognition and the relationship between music and cognitive processes. And I'm focusing on three main topics, which are music reward, memory, and social sharing. The first one, music reward, is related to the fact that we know that music is among one of the most rewarding activities for humans. So that provides hedonic responses, but also motivational responses. And there are many questions about the underlying cognitive and neural mechanisms that allow music to be so rewarding for us. The second topic, which I will show is, for me, very much interconnected, is memory. And is based on all the research showing that music can boost or promote memory for the music itself, but also for non-musical information, such as autobiographical episodes or verbal information. And this is true in both normal and clinical populations, but again, with a lot of inter-individual differences and the need of understanding the main underlying mechanisms. And the third, even more new probably, topic concerns social sharing, which is based on the fact that music is an intrinsically social stimulus. We usually experience it in a social context. And in order to better understand also the reward and memory processes, probably we should include this social component in the research and moving also to more ecological and naturalistic settings. So the idea today is just to show you how I got to develop these main topics and how they are interconnected. And the idea is to try to do so by showing you which has been the main path through Europe, as Anna was saying also before. Of course, I'm going to provide what has been my experience, which is very personal. So I cannot say that this is how this is functioning in Europe in general, but in some way I got in contact with the European networks that maybe can be of help also for understanding the general European situation, but still is my personal journey. So as you are probably understanding from my accent, I'm Italian, so I'm originally from Italy. But then I moved to France in Dijon to get my PhD in cognitive psychology, which I got in 2014. And then I moved for 3 years and a half to Barcelona University in Spain as a postdoc researcher. After this experience, I got back to France in Lyon for a maître de conférence position, which is a sort of junior associate professor position. And then I had the possibility to come back to Italy to work for the first time in Italy a few years after the PhD, first as a researcher and since February as an associate professor too. So I'm currently at the University of Pavia, which is this beautiful, nice city in the north of Italy, and currently living in Milan. So if I had to put it differently, as I don't know in Australia how it is, but in Italy, maybe you know that we are very much passionate about food. So if I have to resume this a bit differently, I would say that I had very rewarding food journey, starting with a lot of croissants and boulangerie in France. Then I got to discover and enjoy a lot of tapas in Spain. And then recently I got back to the real joy of pizza in Italy. So the idea now is to take a bit all this path and trying to let you know how I got there and how I developed the main research topics. And I will provide some methodological aspects and main results of some studies too. So maybe just a few questions about how all this started, because I was very lucky to do this PhD program within a European framework, which has been a Marie Curie ITN, an initial training network that was called the EBRAMUS network, that standard for European Brain and Music. And if we take the main aim of this network was to investigate back in 2009, 2010, the attractive, promising new research avenue at the intersection of neuroscience, human sciences, and new technologies. And the main questions beyond this network was, can music boost sensory, cognitive, and motor development in normal and impaired children and adults? So this program was very important and interesting, because it put together 10 different labs across Europe with a total of 9 PhD students and 1 postdoc. And each one was specifically working on one topic related to music and language, music and memory, music and movement, and so on. And I was lucky enough to be part of it, and I was specifically associated to the LEAD laboratory in Dijon, which is a CNRS laboratory in France, where the main topic was about memory. Anna knows the lab very well because she's currently there at the moment. So let's say the main research question that was part of this network and was also part of my PhD program was, can background music boost episodic memory? Or put it in other words, does listening to music or having music as a background when we are learning new information and coding new information can improve the retrieval of this information, and through which mechanisms also at a neural level? So I'm not going into much detail of this because it's a long time ago now, but just to resume it, through different studies, we observed that yes, music can boost episodic memory by modulating the prefrontal cortex activity. And in this sense, I had the possibility to learn a new technique, which is the near-infrared spectroscopy. But I also started observing that this depended a lot on the individuals we were studying and the kind of involved mechanisms, which actually open new questions about when and how can music boost memory. So in general, for me, this experience was very important and pivotal because it allowed me to learn methods in cognitive and cognitive psychology and neuroscience. I started to ask the good questions within the field of music cognition. It was crucial for creating a network in Europe with other PhD students and all the other labs that were involved in this. And also based on the results of the studies I was mentioning before, it also helped me to create a personal, or the beginning of a personal line of research based on the main findings and the main non-findings or contrasting findings that I had in my PhD experience. So basically, this allowed me to create a postdoc project that allowed me to move to Barcelona after my PhD. And I went to Barcelona through a fellowship that was actually an Italian fellowship. It's called the Morelli Rotary one. And thanks to this fellowship, I worked within the Cognition and Brain Plasticity unit in the EDBEL Biomedical Center in Barcelona. And this also helped me a lot to create new collaborations on the other side of the ocean with the McGill University. I just wanted to mention also that together with this fellowship, I tried several ones. I was trying to retrieve how many I tried, 3, 4, 5, maybe more, and they just didn't work. And I think this is important to mention too, because I did my research in Barcelona. I really enjoyed these years there, but there was low budget. There have been a lot of challenges to face because of this, and this also sort of pushed the research and the life to be very creative and asked for a lot of adaptability. So I came from European grant with everything set up and nice, and then I went back to the south of Europe main problems. So this required a lot of adaptability, but also was very important because this asked me a sort of to make risky choices, and I developed their bet on the future research questions that then set up everything probably I'm doing also now. And these research questions were mainly related on the underlying mechanisms that could explain how music can boost the cognitive functioning. And therefore, I decided, based also on the line of research of the lab I was in, to focus on music reward. So music reward is part of our music complex experience. And the main questions I tried to ask there were about which are the underpinning mechanisms and how we can measure music reward. So in general, we know that we can measure music reward by asking subjects to listening to music and provide subjective ratings, for example, of how much pleasure they are experiencing or how much they are willing to spend for buying a given song. And we can also associate psychophysiological responses such as skin conductance. So all the studies that have been conducted so far, I mean, at the epoch of my postdoc, were behavioral or neuroimaging studies providing correlational evidence about the implication of the dopaminergic reward system in music reward, but we had no really causal evidence of the underlying mechanisms involved. So in Barcelona, I started to do pharmacological manipulations of the musical pleasurable experience and reward experience, enhancing and blocking target neurotransmitter in the brain in order to provide causal evidence about the neurochemical mechanisms involved. And through different studies, we actually showed that when we were blocking or enhancing the dopaminergic level in the brain, we were bidirectionally modulating the pleasure that people could feel while listening to music, and also how money they were willing to spend to buy new music, and also the psychophysiological responses associated. So we were able to show that the dopamine is a necessary cause for reward behavioral and psychological responses. And we also manipulated the opioid system in a different study, and we saw that the opioids were specifically important for the psychophysiological responses, but not the psychological ones. So this allowed us sort of pinpointing the main mechanisms and starting disentangling which could be the neurotransmitters driving the pleasurable and motivational responses to music. Just to know, are you following me easily? Is everything okay? Do you want me to slow down or to just, is it everything fine? So just have a coffee and...
Perfect for me. I've seen this result so many times, and every time I'm like, wow, what an amazing study. Like really, would have been so much effort to make happen.
Yeah, this has been huge, and this is the typical study I think I would never done with in an optimal condition, because this is what I was saying when you need to be creative. This was a bit the case. It took like 1 year to get the ethical approval for this study, and then almost 1 year to get the data. And this was huge, but really fun also. And then the other main question related to the reward is how we can measure it beyond subjective ratings and beyond neural implications and neural mechanisms. And I've been focusing on the psychometric approaches for studying reward. And more specifically, I've been working a lot on the so-called Barcelona Music Reward Questionnaire, which has been a questionnaire developed for measuring musical hedonia and developed from a bunch of my colleagues in Barcelona. And this is related to the fact that music reward is a very complex construct that varies a lot across individuals. So during the years in Barcelona, I also tried to develop new ways and new to measure music reward and to relate it to also personality traits. So we for example developed new scales and subscales for measuring musical hedonia by including the absorption we can get from music reward when from music listening, when we listen to music and completely get absorbed, or even in transcendent states, and how these are associated to personal traits such as the empathy in children and adults. And in a way, this was interesting because once we have a nice way and easy way to measure reward responses among individuals, then we can see whether this way of getting reward from music can modulate our musical experience. And this is something we applied also later, for example, when we were observing that individual differences in sensitivity to music reward can explain how we use music, for example, for emotional regulation while facing a crisis. This is something we observed, for example, during COVID-19, where the use of music was really improving our psychological well-being, and this is dependent on the level of musical hedonia too. This was also important for me because with this we had the possibility to measure the individual responses to music reward and see whether this can explain, at least in part, some effects that we were observing at a more cognitive level. So this was also a main link between what I developed during the postdoc and the PhD. Because starting from these observations, I was going sort of back to memory, trying to understand whether and how music reward can drive benefits on long-term memory. Because we know from also a more neurobiological perspective that what happens in the mesolimbic reward system can also boost what happens in the hippocampus when we have to encode and retrieve new information. So in order to answer to this kind of question, I've been working on paradigms in which we not only are subject to listening to music and provide reward ratings of pleasure, for example, but we also were measuring the musical hedonia through the questionnaire I've just mentioned. And then we went through episodic memory tests. So we were asking, for example, 24 hours later to listen to the music they listened to the day before and new excerpts. And they had to do, for example, classic memory testing, where they went through old new recognition and then had to provide recollection measures about how well they were retrieving a given excerpt. And this was interesting for us because we could observe actually that the reward we get from music can predict the kind of memory we will have. So what we were showing was that the higher the music reward, both in terms of subjective ratings during music listening, but also in terms of individual musical hedonia scores, the better the episodic memory the day after. And we were also able to show that this was depending on the dopaminergic availability in the brain, because when we disrupted the dopaminergic transmission in the brain pharmacologically, we also disrupted the relationship between pleasure and memory. We sort of applied this kind of rationale of research for the memory for music itself, so how good we are in retrieving musical information, but also for non-musical and verbal associated information. So for example, we were able to show that individuals can show better verbal memory for words that were encoded with more pleasant musical background as compared to unpleasant background or white noise, for example. But this was specifically true for more musical hedonic participants. So showing again that a relationship exists between music reward, both in terms of states and trait, and the encoding and retrieval of musical and non-musical information. So based on this, the actual one of the main point was that music reward is important not only for affective responses but also for cognitive functioning, and therefore there was the need also to understand how we could increase music reward for cognition, and not only by pharmacologically manipulating it, for example, which is very interesting from a research point of view, but also very invasive in imagining it in real life situations. So this actually brought me to the third main topic of my research line, that I had the possibility to develop once back in France. So I went back to France in 2018 as associate professor. And at that moment, I was happy because after 3.5 years without economical stability, I arrived in the French system, which is very strong in a way, and I worked within the EMC laboratory in Lyon University. So together with this, the professional, let's say the professional figure and profile changed. So I had a lot of classes to teach. I had new administrative responsibilities, which completely changed the timetable. And I also was facing a new beginning. So I also faced this need of new research topic that could be in line with my profile. So I applied for grants, and I was lucky in this case because I had 2 specific grants. One is the IDEX grant that was specifically from the City and University of Lyon, and the other one was the ANR, which is the grant from Agence Nationale de la Recherche Scientifique, so the National Research Agency in France. And so these grants were really important because I had the possibility to create a new group with research assistants, a PhD student, buy new material for new research questions. And this was featured by also COVID-19 pandemic, which made things a bit more complicated from under many perspectives, but also because what I wanted to do with these new grants was to study social sharing, and I get you less guess how can be difficult to study social sharing of music just at the beginning of a pandemic. So this was a bit the situation in Lyon for me, but the main question was whether social sharing can boost reward. So starting with the idea that reward is important under many perspectives, and that music is intrinsically social and we can share, and we usually share musical experience with others. The main idea was to test whether sharing music with others could actually improve and increase the pleasure responses to music and therefore also the associated memory. So the main idea, methodologically speaking, here was to, again, ask people to listen to music and provide reward pleasure ratings, but in social situations. So because of COVID-19, the first set of studies we did was online, and we actually created an online social sharing paradigm in which people were believing they were listening to music with others at the same time. This was not true. This was just illusionary. But we made them believe that they were connecting on an online platform in France, where many people were connected at the same time, and they could have the possibility to listen to music alone or with the others. So I'm just showing you this as an example so that you can also see and listen other than my voice. So this was the online platform, and people were connecting, and they were about to know whether there were other persons connected at the same time or not. In this case, there were many people connected in France at the same time, and they had to provide how much pleasure they were experiencing during music listening with the slide bar you see on the screen. But also, once it was possible to go back to real life or lab situations, we were also trying to understand whether listening to music with another person, so with a friend or alone, can improve and increase the pleasure we can get. And in this case, we also adopted a hyperscanning approach in which we were measuring not only behavioral responses, but also the responses of 2 brains at the same time by measuring the prefrontal cortex activity through fNIRS. And here is another example of the experimental setting. I don't know if the audio will work. Tell me. No? So not working, just imagine that there is music. And so you see 2 friends sharing the music situation here and moving along with the music and rating their pleasure through time. and there was another non-social condition in which they were doing exactly the same, but alone in 2 different rooms. So what we were able to show with these kind of studies was that when we measured this online, we consistently found among different studies that the higher was the sharing, even if illusionary, the higher was the reported pleasure. And that this pleasure was also associated with better memory for the excerpts. So we were able to close the loop between pleasure memory and social sharing. And when going in real in-person situation, we were showing that sharing music can increase how much pleasure and similar pleasure we feel within the pairs, but also this was increasing the interneural synchrony within the pairs, so showing also that there was brain coherence mechanisms going on during the social sharing of music. So a bit in the middle of this research, I got a call in which I got the possibility to go back to Italy. And this was a part of a brain gain program in which Italy is trying to call back researchers, because there are many of us everywhere in the world. So I got back to Italy, and I got to join the Department of Brain and Behavioral Sciences in Pavia. Again, this was a new beginning with even more responsibilities, and the goal set at my arrival was, okay, we are interested in creating a music psychology group in Pavia, and in general an Italian hub for music and neuroscience. So with this in mind, what I've been doing over the last years was to try to create a laboratory that we called the Music Cognition Lab in Pavia. There are a few of us, and everybody is very nice, as you can see in the picture. And also I've been working to create a neuromusic Italian network. Probably you are familiar with the neuromusic conference that is held every 2 years in different places in the world. This is usually organized by the Marie Foundation, which is in Milan, and there is this international neuroscience of music and neuromusic community with newsletter and so on. So we were trying a bit to do the same with the Marie Foundation, but in Italy, so connecting together researchers, musicians, music therapists, and we are usually meeting once per year since 3 years from now, and we are working bi-monthly on newsletters, trying to connecting researchers and create a bit of networking and dynamic sharing of information. So in terms of research, what I wanted to do was to continue my research line, also getting involved with my new colleagues, but also to getting closer to real life. And as I'm working on my territory for the first time, the idea was also to try to engage people in citizen science events, taking this as an opportunity to do more ecological and naturalistic experiments. So in this sense, I had the possibility to study what I was studying so far in laboratory, so music reward and doing music listening during live performances. And in this sense, I had the possibility to work in 2 main events. One was actually in Barcelona with the Barcelona group. We got to the Sonar Festival, which is an electronic music festival in Barcelona, and we wanted to see whether and how the reward and pleasure and curiosity responses to music could be linked to the willing to spend and the motivational responses to music. And the other one was with the Milan Symphonic Orchestra, in which we created this event that we called the Neurosymphonic Experiments. In which we asked people to come to the auditorium, which is the Civic Auditorium in Milan, and to listening the orchestra playing. But we were also measuring real time their pleasure and curiosity ratings through their smartphone. We had almost 1,000 persons in the room, and this was linked together with a vulgarization dissemination event in which we were explaining the neuroscience of music too. So just briefly, because otherwise it will be too long to go into details, but I will be happy to share more details with you about that. What we basically did with this kind of experiments was, first of all, to replicate what we found previously in the labs. So for example, we found that the higher the reward provided during music listening in live performance, the more participants were also willing to spend for a given song. So we linked hedonic and motivational responses to music in real life situations, and we got also many data that we could work with in predictive models, for example, with machine learnings, trying to predict participants' response based on their reward ratings. And we were able to train also machine learning models that were very accurate for real life data. And we were also able to replicate lab results for the memory part, showing that the higher the music reward experience during the live performance, the better also the memory for the excerpts that people were listening during the live performance the day after, when we tested them in surprise memory tests when they were at home. And also, what we could do in this kind of settings, and more specifically in the performance with the Milan Symphonic Orchestra, we were able to study more than we can usually do in lab, the temporal dynamics and interdependence of reward responses over time. So having almost 1,000 people rating over time their curiosity or pleasure allowed us to study the interdependence between these two kinds of responses over time, and to have a sort of outcome that would be very difficult to have in lab settings. So I'm trying to go through some conclusions, if that works for you. So first of all, some conclusions about the research questions. I know that there have been many, and I hope not too much superficial, but this was to show in a way that music can represent a unique tool for studying cognition, for studying both affective and cognitive processes, but also their interaction, showing that we should not separate emotion from cognition, but studying them together can improve actually our understanding of them. And we were able to show that music-driven reward responses depend on the dopaminergic transmission, that these reward responses can drive improvements in episodic memory performance according to individual differences, and also can be boosted by social sharing of music. And what we also highlighted with the last experiments was that lab findings can be replicated, but also expanded in ecological settings. So for me, this is something particularly interesting for the future, to trying to get more into real life with standardized and strong lab paradigms. And just some conclusions about the journey. For me, at least, Europe has been a strong opportunity for training, but also for building a collaborative network since the beginning. And this network is part of my research life also today in the psychology and neuroscience of music. I think that this is generalizable across countries. Grant opportunities exist, but they can be very difficult and vary across country and timing also. What I can say about my last years of Italian experience is that Italy is emerging as a hub for neuromusic research, with a growing community that goes beyond individual labs. So I've been speaking about my personal experience, but with this brain gain program, there have been many of us coming back to Italy. So there is Pavia, but there is also Rome, there is south of Italy. So we are sort of creating a community here. And overall, I think that Europe offers a vibrant ecosystem of people and labs supporting this kind of work. So that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention, and I'm here for any questions, of course, and discussion.